Hello everybody. Welcome to DSC's Loyola Stuck at Home Week 6. I hope everyone's doing great today. Today we have Week 6 of Tech at Home featuring Accenture's Jay Samson, Mark Nielsi, and Kay Salgado for Empathy Breeds Innovation Design Thinking Essentials. So, what is DSC? Just to give you a briefer on who we are, I'm Polly Materna. I am the Chief Human Resources Officer of the Developer Student Clubs Loyola. And Developer Student Clubs, they're university based community groups for students that are powered by Google developers. So, together with all the other chapters, we aim to build student skills and network by giving them access to different technologies, specifically Google developer technologies. We also value a peer to peer learning environment and build solutions for the community. So, our vision, we envision ourselves as a community of students that are passionate about uplifting communities through technology and innovation. With a mission to, number one, empower people through technology and programming education. Number two, enlighten them through the power of innovation and problem solving. And number three, nurture them to create meaningful technological solutions for the community. So, in summary, developer student clubs help students bridge the gap between theory and practice. So, as you know, today we'll be having Empathy Breeds Innovation, Design Thinking Essentials. So, using design thinking and inclusive design as an engine for innovation, learning how to start your design thinking journey, how we seek problems, and how we solve problems using this new way of working. So, we'll go over number one, design thinking overview, phases of design thinking, methods of design thinking, and inclusive design. So, let's welcome our speakers. So, first and foremost, we have Jay Samson. Let me just add you there.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hello, Jay. So, Jay Samson is a design thinking lead and business agility lead of Accenture. So, Jay, how are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing fine. So, what have you been doing lately?
Oh, back-to-back meetings. In fact, after this, I still have another three meetings,
Yeah,
client calls, and all that. But it's all good because the team have been very busy with a lot of learnings and also a lot of workshop with our customer.
yeah, it's amazing. Thank you so
What
much,
about
Jay. So,
you?
oh, honestly, I just been watching a lot of stuff like this and helping developer student clubs. And I'm here right now hosting for you all, and I'm so excited to learn more from you guys.
It's good.
Okay. So thank you, Jay. Our second speaker today is Mark Nielsi. Mark Nielsi is a design thinking lead coach and the software engineering manager of Accenture. So let's pull up Mark. Hello, Mark. How are
Hi,
you?
I'm good and excited for today. Thanks for having us.
No problem. So what have you been doing lately, Mark?
Yeah, it's a matter of transitioning from the typical face-to-face work that we heavily do
Mm,
for the design thinking work, but with the advancement of technologies, we can do it remotely also. As distributed as we are in the COVID situation, we can continue innovating, and that's what we're going to teach today.
Thank you so much. That was so good. So our third speaker for today is Kay Salgado. She is the user experience designer of Accenture. So let's pull up Kay. Hello,
Hi.
Kay.
Hi, good evening,
How are you
everyone.
doing?
Thanks so much for having us.
No problem. So what have you been doing lately?
So, same as everyone else, I think we've still been fairly busy because with the work and technology, we have available technology to still be able to continue our work even from at home. So that's something that we really thank God for. Thanks for technology, so to keep us all
Yeah.
still connected. And I guess also I've been doing a lot of
Mm.
yoga to still balance the mental health and everything. So that's good.
Amen.
Mm.
Amen to that, guys.
That's true. Yeah. The whole emotional weight of a pandemic is no joke. So I really hope not just our speakers here, but also our viewers right now are really making sure to really be in touch with their mental health and their own boundaries. You don't have to be pressured to be productive, but we're so thankful that you guys are here to watch us today. So today we're going to be doing as it's very good to have empathy like amongst each other. So today we talk about empathy beats innovation, design thinking essentials. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask or you'd like for us to give to our speakers, you may actually drop it in the comments below. Whether you're watching from YouTube or you're watching from Facebook, you can go drop it off in the comments. I'll do my best to drop it off after like in the video so we can go through them properly. Okay. So first, are you ready? You may now present your talk.
Hey, thanks, Wally. Again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on empathy. Empathy breeds innovation, or the design thinking basics. Um, you may post your questions, just like what Polly showed earlier, at any given time in the chat window found at the right hand of the screen. And should you want to post anonymously, I think you can also have a tick box there so that you can ask questions freely. And let's start. Again, my name is Jay. I'm an associate director in Accenture, and I also lead the Liquid Studio Manila. I lead the enterprise agile transformation practice in our advanced technology centers in the Philippines, and I'm the first design thinking faculty certified in our AAPAC practice. In the next an hour and a half or 2 hours, join me and my team. You have Kai and Neil as we share with you the basics of design thinking and how it is relevant in this social distancing situation of today. So, based on our extensive design thinking experience, one of the key ingredients in doing innovation are its members. I'm pretty sure you will agree with me because I remember when I was a student, when our teacher wants us to form a group, if you have 20 members, normally they will ask you to count 1 to 4, or sometimes height. I'm always part of the smaller one. And voila, you have 4 groups of 5 people. And then as you start doing even your thesis, right? As you start doing your innovation, what you will notice is that 1 or 2 of the group tend to be very quiet or not progressing, and what you will realize is that majority of the members of that group are actually having a mindset of an engineer. So what we did is we adopted an exercise which is called Dominant Worldview from the book of Jeff DeGraff, The Innovation Code. And I would like to start this webinar with this simple exercise for you to know what is your dominant worldview. So grab your pen and paper, and let us take this simple exercise together so that you will discover what is your dominant worldview. Are you guys ready? Okay, so let's go along. Again, do not overthink. Answer based on your intuition or your gut feel. First question: what is the most important thing to you? I'll be timing it around 10 seconds per question. Okay, we go to the next question. What are you best at? Okay, time's up. Let's go to the next question. How would you best describe yourself? 5, 4. Okay, next question. How do you make decisions? Okay, next question. What do you invest your time in? 4, 2, 1. Time's up. Next question. What do you do the most as a leader? Time's up. Next question. What is the role that you most relate to? Thumbs up. Last two questions. How are you best describe your in your daily life? Last question. What attribute applies to you the most? 2, 1. Okay, so now tally all of your answers and let me know which one has the most from all the letters, because the highest will tell you what is your dominant worldview. So if you have the most number in letter A, that means you are an artist as a mindset, which later I'll tell you the different traits of an artist. If you're C, you're an engineer as a mindset. And then if you're B, it's an athlete, and D is a sage. Sometimes what you will realize is that you will actually have two or three dominant worldview. It's very rare that you will have all of four equal as your mindset. But most of the time, you have one dominant mindset or two of the dominant mindset. And what's important about this is that when you're forming a group of innovators, you want to have this group of people looking at a problem and solving as a problem as well. So for those artists that we have in the call right now, you may want to emulate this following famous personalities that have the same mindset as you. And what are the characteristics of these people, like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and even Larry Page? They take a lot of risk. I don't know if you saw the news today about NASA and SpaceX with their launch of two astronauts going to the space station. But unfortunately, with the weather today, it has to be postponed on Saturday. But that's one thing that Elon Musk is actually known about. He's very futuristic, he's very creative, and also he's always he's a visionary. So he's always forward looking. Some of the weaknesses of people who are artists as a mindset, they tend to break a lot of rules. They become a bit rebellious and impulsive as well. And a lot of the time is that they're unable to make realistic plans. A good example when we have this, I remember Neil and I think I have Kaya as well with me when we went to Cebu, when we had this workshop where 80% of the participants are actually artists as a mindset. They came up with a lot of crazy ideas, but when we start to double click on those ideas, they're really crazy. It's very difficult for us to actually implement them. That's why we always recommend get the good mix of members in your innovation team. As for those athletes as a mindset, you may want to emulate Tim Cook and in January. This specific individual actually pursue key goals. If you're running a, let's say, a work group activities, these individuals, you will see them as the one pushing the team. Guys, 5 minutes more. Let's do it. Let's do it. Because they always want to overcome such challenge and be there at the forefront. They are very strategic and they're also very opportunistic. They're very much focused with their goals and objective. That's just focusing on such goals. So those are some of the weaknesses of an athlete as a mindset. For the engineers, they are the ones who actually very systematic. They put a lot of logical reasoning in their thought process. They're very analytical as well. They analyze a lot of things, and sometimes one of the weakness of them is when they have this analysis paralysis. And when you are doing some innovation, what we've seen as an observation is that when a group have more than 50% engineer, I tell you, those people are very quiet and they tend to procrastinate a lot, especially when you are coming up with a lot of ideas. They tend to tell you, no, you can do that because of this, it can comply to this, it can comply to that. So when you are doing exercises with an engineer and it's all about creativity, ask them to suppress the mindset of an engineer. Instead, ask them if they have another hat that they can wear. Maybe it's an athlete or an artist, then use that. The moment you start doing prototype, when you need their brain power in terms of how logical the ideas are not, that's where you can actually leverage with the engineers. So Warren Buffett and Xi Jinping are actually the types of individual that you want to emulate if you have this kind of mindset. As for the sage, which is the fourth dominant worldview, they are the ones who are very much connected with their emotion, just like Jack Ma. They are people developers. They manage relationship. These individuals, you will see them, especially if this is a thesis and you're having some group discussion. They will normally tend to ask everyone's opinion just so everyone feel that they belong. They're very sensitive and caring. One of the weaknesses, though, is that because they tend to get everyone's opinion, they tend to act slowly and a bit unassertive in a way. But they're actually good to be part of an innovation because sometimes when you're dealing with new technology, they are the ones who will ask us, if I'll be doing this, will it affect humanity? Will it be a technology that will be for the benefit um, of the of humanity, or tech for good, something that will help the community? They are the ones who will come up with those kind of ideas. So again, that specific exercise is just a snippet of that amazing book of Jeff DeGraff, The Innovation Code. So for you guys, especially now that you are still in social distancing situation, all of us, but anyway, if you have time, please read this book. And also, another book that I can recommend is Change by Design by Tim Brown, the CEO of IDEO, which I got the chance uh, to have a discussion last year when I was in Singapore with him in one of the conference that I attended. So I'm pretty sure you know this guy. Almost all innovative company in the world, just like Apple, where Steve Jobs actually changed the way we perceive technology, uses some form of design thinking. So it is super important for you guys, whether you want to be a designer or you want to be a product manager, or whether you are just interested with the topic itself, to understand what design thinking is very important. Because no matter where you go or which company in the future you would work, and if you're going to work on a product, or if you're going to work that is anything related to the topic of innovation, I tell you, people will start to talk about design thinking and it's gonna come up. It's been everywhere and it's been used for the last 20 years and it's not going anywhere. In fact, my team, we've been elevating our practice as well. Kai, Neil, and myself are IDO certified. This year, Neil and myself got our own certification as well in Lego Serious Play, where we were given the chance to take this certification in Billund, Denmark, where it actually elevates the way um, we use design thinking in our work. And it actually the beginning of an agile transformation journey. So these are the global network of top agencies in the world right now. And I think the very first question that we should be asking ourselves is, what is design thinking? So for me, in simple terms, design thinking is a philosophy plus set of tools to help you solve problem creatively. That is the first thing that you need to understand. Now, whether a company is trying to create something new or trying to solve a problem, or maybe a team is trying to solve a complex problem, you can use design thinking to get to the solution or the art of the possible. Although I know there are several methods or way of solving a problem, design thinking focuses on the human-centered way of solving a problem. It is about empathizing. It's about figuring out who are you designing for, what their needs are, what are their pain points, and helping them solve the problem. And it's even good if you can actually solve it with them. And then helping you to actually innovate based on those data or information that you gathered through the design thinking process. IDEO, Fjord is actually another Accenture company. And even strategizer, have their own way of interpreting design thinking, and sometimes they call it as a double diamond approach, where it will include both divergent and convergent thinking, from the designing or understanding of your customer, which is through the empathy part, um, up to the point that you will start to define their problem statement, which is the defined part. And then you will start to do another divergent thinking where you gather different ideas or inspiration through ideation of high quality, then eventually you will start to converge again to a more focused prototype. While in other company use double diamond, in Accenture we actually call it as form methodology, and it comes in 5 different phases, which is discover, where you will learn about the people, you will get context about the who are you trying to innovate for, and then you synthesize all those data that you have. And for me, I've been always sharing this to an organization or a group of individuals who are learning about design thinking, the importance of discover, because this process is not linear, but it takes a lot of time. That's why I always stress, if you want to embark into design thinking, make sure you focus a lot of your attention in the discovery phase, because you don't want to waste your time going, though it's an iterative, it's best that you know who are you trying to help, what are you trying to solve, what are your OKRs or the objective and key results. Once you have that, once you stress a lot of importance of doing discovery, like interview, observation, or even shadowing, then you're ready to actually embark to design thinking. It's easier to have all those contexts so that you have data or patterns that will tell you where the innovation is. The other way that you can actually use the discover part is if you have data. A lot of organizations right now are sitting in a massive amount of data. So yeah, sometimes those data may not be clean, but those information can actually help you look for patterns, whether a specific innovation is needed for a specific part of their organization with their existing data, or sometimes you can even come up with predictive solution based on what will be the future data that they can collect through different avenue like social media or maybe some of the surveys that they do. The other thing is that once you have insights using discovery, you start to describe the problem by reframing the problem statement itself. You synthesize your findings from the discovery into a more focused point of view. Then you will be able to know who is the persona you're trying to help. You have a deeper understanding of their customer journey, and then you can pinpoint where is the future of innovation. Once you are done with describe, you will do a co-creation, uh, which is one thing that I love doing, because this is where you will become crazy in terms of thinking of future solution and also getting building on top of what are the existing solutions in the market of today. Then after that, you scale it by testing your ideas, which later Neil and Kai will be giving you a double click of all these phases of design thinking. And then sustain is just to actually have it scaled. So from the double diamond and also from the form way of design thinking that we use in Accenture, what do you think is common in both of this organization? It's empathy. So when you are innovating using design thinking, you actually innovate for empathy, where it really boils down to the customer centricity of your solution. Because you know, as a customer, you would love to use whatever solution that you will build. But for you guys, I know the moment you start working in an organization, you will see these types of mindset. Even for me, before I started doing design thinking, the previous company that I've worked for before are always at the tech first mindset. When they were given a problem, automatically they will get their people, they will start getting posted and then brainstorm without even understanding what's causing such problem. Then we change it. In Accenture, we're transitioning to change the mindset of our people to be more human informed mindset, where it's it's all about the people, it's all about their experience, it's all about how we can iterate that. It's the feedback loop that we can actually improve whatever services that we have. And agile is another thing. It's funny because last night I just finished a webinar about agile as well, and it's very interactive. A lot of organizations, especially in this current situation, wanting to be more agile and nimble, where they are able to adapt in the current situation, and then they can catch up with the speed to market of whatever services that they're offering. On top of that, when you're having a human informed mindset, people will enjoy how they do their work because it's collaborative, it's cross functional. People are upskilling themselves to stay relevant and they are being adaptive. At the end of the day, if before, especially when you start working, what you will realize with the traditional kind of mindset, a lot of the requirements, if you're reading an RFP or a proposal, a lot of the requirements of your customer will be based on Excel, but when you're doing human informed mindset, your prototype, which is something that Kai will share later, like low fidelity prototype and high fidelity prototype, will drive the requirements. And they start small, but they are scalable and useful. And at the end of the day, just like my team, that's why a lot of people see us, even though we have a lot of work, we feel like it's a serious play. We're enjoying, we're playing in our work because we have our own flow where imagination happens. And while we're doing a lot of imaginative work, it's also something that we can deliver. So design thinking itself makes this has 7 characteristics that's making it as a unique way of thinking. And I tell you, anyone can actually use design thinking. When I started learning about it, I didn't have a formal training, but because I'm so into it, I started to experiment with one of my customer. They were willing to experiment with me. Then I learned a couple of things, and then I started to file up the different methods that I created. And then I started to embark in learning with IDEO, and then even having my global certification because I'm having fun when I was doing design thinking. Because a lot of it is that I feel good when I know that the solutions that I'm actually bringing forward to my customer is something that their customer will love to use as well. That's where it involves empathy in the process. While you are ideating, you're also exploring solutions that focuses with customer centricity. As it defines problems also, it's actively seek for solutions. And for us, one of the thing that I love the most is when we start to expand our learnings or our knowledge by doing market research. The other thing is that when we get ourselves involved with a lot of global conferences, and we're myself and Neil are fortunate that we've been in the US for some conferences about design thinking. We were in Deland. If not because of COVID, this month I'm supposed to be in Manchester just to really learn more about this global methodologies because we want to put them here in the Philippines so that we can help more people to learn about this because we champion these global methods. And on top of that, design thinking is very collaborative. That involves a lot of iterative prototyping. And then it's not just about solving or creating software, it solves many types of problems. So, in a nutshell, form design thinking is actually defined as applying human-centered approach to understand people's needs, that spot opportunities and develop more meaningful solutions through collaboration and co-creation. And I would like to pass on this webinar to Neil because he will do a double click with the different methods of design thinking. And later, we will share with you some of the use cases where we use design thinking to create a technology for the betterment of those demographic or those group of people that will benefit with that solution. So with that, thank you for your time. And now I'm handing it over to Neil for the succeeding part of the webinar.
Thank you,
Neil?
Jay.
Yeah.
Thanks for that wonderful start with this session. So, hi everyone. Again, good evening. Thanks for joining the webinar tonight. I am Neil C, and I have been working with Accenture for about 10 years now, and I'm currently part of the Liquid Studio Manila, and I'm one of the design thinking leads in the Advanced Technology Centers of Accenture in the Philippines. So now focusing on the first phase of design thinking, discover. So the divergence of insights, we get as much data as we can, both qualitative and quantitative. So Jay has mentioned empathy is a commonality in each framework that are differently represented in each of the design agency that he has presented. He also took a very great principle of design thinking in which we are working with diverse backgrounds. So in design thinking, we gather the right mix of people. An example is the dominant worldview. Whenever we're doing workshops, if we can get people from the business, IDEO does it with MBAs, engineers, technologies, the people with PhDs, and also people starting just with their jobs right now. We want to get a variety of point of views when we do design thinking. So this slide perfectly displays that design thinking is not only a method, more importantly, it is indeed a mindset. So in the discover phase, we put that in mind when we do our research. So empathy is not feeling sorry about someone or liking or agreeing with the people. Empathy is understanding and co-opt someone's feelings. We have to understand what people are doing, and we also have to understand why people feel the way they do when they are doing it. So it is both cognitive and emotional. So the discover phase is, as I mentioned, is the divergence of what we can know from a design thinking research. Before we ideate to solve a problem, we seek the problem. We start with a very high level problem statement, and we invest a reasonable amount of time in the discovery as it is a critical initiation. So the question of the matter is, why design a product if nobody will use it, right? So it's in the discovery that can help us pivot on away from that direction. So I'll be teaching you some of the methodologies that can quickly start you off from the observation, learning for its stream, and also creating your problem statements later on. So this is a very innate skill for everyone here, right? So in our science projects, before we even head into concluding and even creating a hypothesis, we observe first. So in design thinking, how we normally call this skill is we're flying on the wall. So it's a fly on the wall observations. So it allows you to gather information without directly engaging with users. And that is in order for us to limit any potential bias or behavioral influence. So it is an ideal choice in situations in which you may suspect your observations may cause edited speech, actions, and behaviors. So practice how to listen to your eyes in order for you to understand what people value and care about. So you may be thinking, what is a potential output of the observation, right? So in our experiences, it's one of the most unbiased set of insights that we got from seeing and just listening. So we're talking about first-hand insights that can be used as a data point on your interviews and even describing your problem statement further later on as you progress on your design thinking research. So you can start with observation. So it's just looking at wherever you are right now, and it's a matter of looking at your environment and observing and getting data as soon as you see it from your eyes. So the next one that I'm going to show you is one of my favorite books. So JS mentioned Change by Design and also The Innovation Code by Jeff DeGraff. This one, I'm an idol of Kat Holmes. So just a quick story, when we met her in a Fortune conference in Singapore, she shared her wonderful book called Mismatch. So it is a very powerful book that revolves around how inclusion shapes design. Now, the etymology of inclusion from a Latin word inclusio, it means shutting up. So which means that exclusion is shutting out, inclusion is shutting in. So imagine inclusion as confining inside a circle. So for you to be inclusive, you have to include the people from outside the circle. I'll be touch pointing that because we have a double click for that later on. But how do you practically do it, right? So this method that you're seeing on your screen is learning from the extremes from the IDEO design kit. So it is identifying both the big, broad, mainstream, and those either extreme of the spectrum before doing the interview. So this allows us to look how the target demography is scattered and distributed. Most of the time, when we are solving and using technology for a solution, we involve the average population. So it's a normal bell curve distribution, but it doesn't include everyone in the population, right? So the idea here really is for us to be more inclusive and for us to be better in designing products and services, we have to include the experiences of the people in the exterior part of the population. And that is including people with disabilities, including our people with a very old age or even young born or even what else do we have? People with financial challenges. So those are very good starting data points whenever you're doing your design thinking research. So use this in your next sampling and your thesis in the future. It's going to be a better and a more inclusive data point. So Another good thing that you will be getting from here is this example. It's an actual output of Jay when he took the IDO certification from, I think, if I'm not mistaken, from Insights to Innovation course. So it talks about the commute experience of the Filipino mass transportation. So there's a lot of things that he did here, going to the actual jeepneys, tricycles, and also interviewing not only the passengers but also the drivers. So what we learned is that it's insightful for me when he was able to get that a lot of the people beyond 80 years old are still riding our jeepneys. And also, there are instances wherein unsupervised, less than 5-year old uh, children are riding the mass transportation. So imagine those very extreme experiences that we're having, right? So if you include that in your solution potentially, then I think it's going to be a better solution in the average population. So how do you systematically do this? You may be wondering how you can jumpstart it, right? So I have the next two slides indicating steps of how you can do this, right? So number one, think of it as something a question of who are the people that are the typical users that you have, or even what are the different data points that you can really gather. So you can start with maybe age, income level, uh, physical disability, and other data points. So once you have identified these data points, try to distribute them on the X and Y axis that you have seen earlier, right? So once you have that distribution, you'll be having this extreme, this particulars on the left and right hand side, right? So you'll now be identifying the extreme users. So imagine if you have age, financial capacity, and also physical ability. If you identify the extremes of those three data points, you'll be having six extreme users already. And that is people with very old age, people with that are very young, people with are extremely rich, or people below the poverty line, and also people with very athletic, and also those with limitations. So having this vast amount of extreme users and including them in your problem and in your solution later on will be a more inclusive and a better variety of interactions that you will be including in your solution. Okay. So the next one that I'm going to share you, it's revolving around some pointers. So this is an example on the next slide that I was mentioning. So some pointers around here is whenever we're trying to uh, determine who are the people that we're trying to help. Based on experience, if we include the people in the extreme population, it's going to be a more difficult challenge statement, right? But whenever we solve their problems or their pain points, it is easier to solve the problem of the mass or the average people because you already solved the harder problems. So it's just extending that experience to the average distribution. So the next is an example. So this is one magnificent job that Jay did that I mentioned even earlier already. All right. So another technique that you can also use in your discovery. So imagine you already have this different stakeholders and people. So it's the territory map. So we're still in the discover phase. So if you want to understand who are the people, the parties involved on a particular experience. So I'll cite an example with the commute still. So number one, people included in that experience will be the passengers, the admin in the LRT station, or the drivers, and even the government. So these are the different people and parties that has an involvement in that experience. The tools and processes, on the other hand, the second circle that you can see here, represents what are the different activities that they're doing. So these can be examples like the queuing management system, or even the entry and exit to a particular station. Or you can think of it as how do people purchase a particular ticket before they are able to enter that LRT station or MRT station, right? So that's the second circle. The last circle that you can see here are other business drivers and factors. Most of the time, when we're putting up post-its on the third circle, it talks about some of our uncontrollables. So this can be a very personal trait of the people. It can be about their personal behavior, their uh, their religion affiliations, stuff like their uh, like in the government, for example, we don't have control with the budgets, the weather, physical calamities, etc. So those are the other business drivers and factors that when it happens, it may affect the experience of the people. So imagine this: if you have a territory mapping, you have the people, you have the tools and the processes, and you have the other business drivers and factors. So if you have this big illustration, you can have a bird's eye view of how and what happens in the current as is experience of the people. So it's very, very, very useful. Now, the next activity or even the phase that you may progress to is the describe phase. So, as I have mentioned, the discover phase is more on the divergent thinking or gathering as much data as we can. Now, on the discover phase, if it's the divergence of insights, on the describe phase, on the other hand, it's the convergence of findings. So, in design thinking research, we converge into a more concrete, organized, and comprehensible version of our transcript. So I have a few of the activities that we normally do when we are describing. So starting up with the persona. So the persona, if it's your first time hearing about it, it is a collective summary of the mindset, needs, goals, and typically all of the key stakeholders that you interacted with in the discover phase. There are certain reasons why we normally use this in design thinking, and let me show you an example, which will be showing the next slide also. So as an example, we have Samantha Wong. So Samantha Wong, it's not her real name. So it's not someone from the ones that we interviewed, but you can be as creative as you can in naming your persona. So it can be Juan de la Cruz. It can be a very Filipino name, by the way. It can be Ariana Venti if you want to be a little bit funny on your naming convention, right? So it's a very high level name just to depict who that person you're trying to represent. So some parts that are critical here are the high level scene for the day in the life of Samantha Wong, a collective version of the frustrations and also the goals of all the people, of all your target people that you interviewed and observed. So this persona will be our center point. Not forgetting that we are designing for people, we carry Samantha as we progress to ideating for potential solutions later on. So your persona is something that you carry along in the succeeding phases, which is pretty much related to the next activity that I'll be showing also. It's all about the customer journey. So the customer journey, which is an emphasis on the as is of this version of the experience, it talks about what are the certain activities that your persona is doing and how do they feel about it. So I have a template here that I'll be showing on how you can lay it out. So it has three different layers. So the first layer in the stage on the next slide also is determining what are the start, the middle, and the end. The middle can be multifold, but definitely there is always a start and an end in a certain experience, right? So the second layer are the step-by-step methods or activities the persona may do on that certain key stage. So the green post-it that you can see here. Now the last layer is the most important part because this is where we empathize further with our persona by measuring how would she or he feel when she do a certain step. So imagine this to be the emotional journey of your persona. So typically when we do this, this is also one of our bases. What is the innovation challenge that we can carry and solve a problem or solve or even ideate with? So imagine you have this low points on the customer journey. So these are the ones that we normally encircle, and they serve to be the starting points for a refined problem statement and an innovation challenge also. So as a result, that's going to be our potential design challenge. Now, I mentioned earlier that when we do discover, we have a very high level problem statement, and it doesn't need to be a phrase, a question. It can also be a topic at hand that you're interested of improving. But the exit for you to proceed in an ideation in a co-creation phase, it's going to be a refined problem statement. So at the end of this phase, our exit criteria will be this version. So once you have identified your design challenges from the customer journey, you can reframe it to a better and a more concrete version. So the final output of the describe will be something like these. So I'll be talking more about how can you tailor and even improve your framing at this time. So number one, uh, try framing it in a positive way. So psychologically and also whenever you're presenting it to someone, if you start with a negative note, it may be affecting the perception of that particular problem. But you can always term the same thing without being too negative or pessimistic with the situation, right? So imagine you have this uh, problem statement on a negative note, like how might we make the pre-flight experience less confusing? Now you're trying to state already at the very first engagement with your co-creation phase that the experience is already confusing. So how should we make it less confusing? So that may affect the mindset of the people co-creating with you. You can state it, on the other hand, on a better framing, like how might we make the pre-flight experience feel easy, right? So it kind of tackles the same theme of the problem, but you frame it differently. Now, the second point is solution agnostic, right? So we are creating a problem statement. We're not solving the problem inside your problem statement. So don't indicate any very specific solutions that will be solving the problem, because you're not creating a solution statement. You're creating a problem statement. So instead of being too specific on the solution that you're trying to use, make it exploratory as it can be, because at the end of the day, you're not yet ideating, you're starting your exploration for potential solutions. Now, last 2 points here, I'll be merging it. So not too broad and not too narrow. So being too narrow, on the other hand, makes it a little bit too specific on the overall experience. And if you just improve that specific point or a specific step, it may not be a big improvement in the current experience, right? So you have to balance that whenever you're choosing or framing your problem statement. It's not too specific that if you improve that particular point in the experience, it's just going to be a minute improvement also. So try to explore a little bit bigger. But the other end is being too broad. So a good example is the one that you can see on the screen here. How can we make the customers happy? So it's very broad in a way that there's no problem really being stated on this statement, right? So it's going to be harder for you to progress even if you start with this problem statement. So it's also a pitfall, common pitfall, uh, by being too broad at the start and continuing with it without even selecting or even dissecting what really the problem is. So that's the purpose of the problem statement. You have to indicate what the problem is in the problem statement. All right. Now, going to the next phase, I have a few more slides here. The co-creation phase. So co-create, once you have converged to a problem statement, refined it, we seek solutions now. So as you remember, we emphasize problem seeking in the first two phases of design thinking. Now, for us to progress, we now seek potential solutions to those problem statements. Now, co-create is both the divergence and convergence of ideas. So I'll end up with the divergence, and Kai will work on the convergence of ideas in creating prototypes, right? So number one technique that I'm very much of a favorite, I have this on my favorite list. So this technique is called the creativity matrix. So it's both practical, economical, and also creative at the same time. Now, collecting the different problem statements as a start, use them as your columns here. So at the upper right end here, you have your how might we 1, 2, 3, 4. So these are your refined problem statements. Now on the rows, this is where you typically identifies what are the applicable areas where you can solve those particular problems. No, it's spanning from different facets. So I have a few of examples here that you can use for the solution enablers portion. So it's just 9 or 8 sets of solution enablers. But as an example, uh, whenever we're doing a workshop, it's not always just these solution enablers. There can always be a wild card not included here, but it can be a pretty good guide. So you can start with technology, events and programs, and also other things like hotspots, hangouts, and people and even partnerships. Now, you might appreciate it more by looking at an actual output. So I have an example here from Luma Institute also. So it's a matter of merging these two different areas, first on the problem statement and next on what are the solution enablers. So an example, we use post-its to fill it out. So you'll be ending up with a matrix like this. And another principle in design thinking is uh, do not use just words. It's going to be a better story to tell if you use icons, you use some sketches and also doodles whenever you are posting a post. So in short span amount of time, imagine just 30 minutes or even 45 minutes, merging these data points that you have, you can be able to generate tons of ideas. So in this case, we have about 40 to 50 ideas already in just a matter of 45 minutes. So imagine that. Which goes me to the last point that I would want to emphasize also, that at the end of the day, we always recommend to have an idea prioritization technique. So we can't implement all of the wonderful ideas that you were able to ideate with the team. So we do some voting and prioritization. So number one, this is one of the simplest thing for you to prioritize idea is use the voting dots. So you can either, if you don't have stickers, you can either use your markers or Sharpies also. Mark what are the top 5 ideas that as an individual you think to be the top ideas that can solve the problems. Now, once we have those top voted ideas, this goes to the next step that you're seeing right now. So you can systematically prioritize it by having two different measures. So on the x-axis, it's talking about the importance and the impact to the users. So if you have top 10 ideas laid out first on that x-axis from left to right, then you will be identifying, okay, this is still important, but this one is more important or more impactful to the user. So that's the first step. The next step is now maneuvering towards the y-axis. So difficulty and cost discussion. So for you, if you're the ones developing or even solving the problem, is it hard for you to do it? Would it cost you when you implement that idea? So maneuver with the y-axis. The upper it is, the higher it is, the more expensive that idea's implementation is. The lower it is, the more valuable it is to the business. So as soon as you finish maneuvering from X and Y axis, definitely you have this representation. If you put it over that distribution, then you have a quadrant. So you have luxuries, targeted, strategic, and high values. So once you identified here, normally when we proceed with the prototyping, we select the high values because these are both lower cost in implementing, but has a very high impact to the users. On some instances, we also go with the strategic ideas because this may has have a higher cost in the implementation, but it still has a high impact to the users. So now, once you identified the features that you would want to add in your idea, you then proceed with the convergence of those ideas to make it into making it a more tangible and a visual representation. Which is why in the next part, I'll be handing you off with my colleague Kai Salgado, which is an expert for prototyping, and she is also our user experience designer in our team. So Kai, whenever you're ready, please take it away.
So thank you for that, Neil. So hi everyone. Again, my name is Kai Salgado. As mentioned earlier, I'm a UX designer and design thinking facilitator at Accenture's Liquid Studio Manila. So I actually like the intro that Polly gave earlier about the Developer Students Club Loyola, because actually front end web development is really one of the skills I hope to learn. So it's one of my goals. I really came from a design background, and then I transitioned to UX, and hopefully in the near future, front end web development to enhance my UX practice even further. So Neil shared with you guys about co-creation phase of design thinking, and I'm gonna drill down on one of the most crucial method, which is prototyping. So prototypes, they're the currency of innovation, right? When you have an idea and you want to bring it to life, the best way to do this is to create a prototype. So you know how you see a good idea sometimes and you say, hey, I had that same concept. I could have done that. But the only difference is that you didn't. So if you want to get your idea out there fast, create a prototype and test it right away. So what exactly is the importance of a prototype? So it creates a uniform picture or a representation of your concept, especially for those who have no clue about what your idea is, right? It's different because different people might be able to interpret your ideas in different ways. Another one is when you see that something is not working in the prototype, you'll know that you have to improve or iterate something right away. So it will save you money and time from producing something that's still sort of raw. Plus, with the technology now, there's so many tools, apps, and websites that are available that can help you in creating your prototype. And there are several ways of prototyping, so it's up to you to decide which one suits your idea the most. I also wanted to share with you guys the 10 principles of prototyping. So this one is from Strategizer. I won't drill down into every single one, but I'll just share with you my favorites. So the first one is embrace a beginner's mind. So it's basically saying like be like a sponge, stay open-minded so that you keep learning as well. And that's something that we always practice in the studio. As facilitators, we have several workshops every week. And even though we teach the same content every time, we learn something new every time as well from the workshop because it's new people that we work with. So there's a new problem to be solved every day and at the studio. So it's always really exciting. Another one is feel comfortable in the liquid state. So it's basically just saying don't conform. So this is actually what our studio was named after, Liquid Studio. So we want to be flexible and adaptable. So especially during these times, right, we want to be able to adapt fast and be agile. So something with prototype, it's the same thing with prototyping also. If something is not working, we always have to think, okay, what's next? What's the next step? Another one I want to share with you guys is create Shrek models. So it's basically saying don't be afraid of your crazy ideas, like what Neil said with the artists who have crazy ideas. And I'm an artist as well. So don't be afraid of your crazy ideas because sometimes maybe it just needs a little bit of refinement. But once you do that refinement, it might be the right solution to your problem. But you also have to remember to expose your work early. So seek advice and critique from other people. So it might be a little bit intimidating, especially asking help from experts. But the insights that they will give you will really help refine your idea further. And lastly, one of my favorites as well is learn fast by failing early. So at the studio, we call it failing mindfully. So of course, documentation is part of that because if not, you would be repeating the same mistakes over and over. So that's a different thing. So those are just some tips that I wanted to share with you guys when you're doing your prototypes. But there are different ways to prototype, and I'll walk you through 4 different kinds today, and I'll show you what they're usually used for. Different industries actually use these different methods, so I'm sure you'll find the right one for your ideas. So the first one is storyboarding. Sorry. So it's usually used for commercials, etc. As long as from the title itself, you can already tell it tells a story. So it can be something as simple as a comic strip. So it's just important to show what it will look like when your idea is introduced into the experience of your user. So as long as you're able to show that, it should be a good storyboard already. If you're not good at drawing, there's so many tools also that are available online. There are lots of free storyboard making platforms online, so I'm sure you'll find the best one for you. So the next one is paper prototyping. So this kind of prototype is best used when testing apps or websites. So I actually use this one a lot for UX. So UX designers use this to test user behavior before developing the app or the website. So what they do is they make a rough sketch of the app or the website, as you can see in the screen, and then they make the user perform a certain action. So for example, they would say, search for the article 5 must-watch K-dramas. And then they would make the user think aloud on what their process is navigating through the paper prototype. And then from there, they can get a good idea on what changes they should make based on the user's journey. Like if certain button placements might be in the wrong places or be moved, then that's things that they really watch out for while doing the user testing. So another one is body storming. So it's sort of like storyboarding, but instead of drawings, it's through acting or like a skit or role playing. I know in college you do this a lot, also in high school. So it's nice to show what it was like before and after a product was introduced in the user's life. So maybe before it would be sad or inconvenienced or hassled, and then after it would be like, wow, thanks to this product, my life is so much easier. So that's something that we do with body storming. And then lastly, there's also scale models. So this one is very familiar to me because I did a lot of this when I was in college. So I actually studied industrial design, and most of our major projects were mostly scale models. So it's used in product design. It can be 3D printed models, Sintra boards, plaster, resin, anything that's molded. So what are these scale models used for? It's because things look differently digitally versus physically. So it's a cost-effective way of seeing it and holding it physically and being able to make quick improvements before you actually mass produce something. Because if you mass produce it before testing it, it would be a very expensive mistake if you decided that you don't like how it turned out. So I also wanted to share and double click on a topic that Neil touched upon, which is inclusive design. He also touched upon learning from the extremes. So inclusive design has a working definition. So it's a methodology that enables and draws on the full range of human diversity. Most importantly, this means including and learning from people with a range of perspectives. But I really like this quote that I want to share with you guys from Susan Goldsman, who's actually the mentor of Cat Homes, which explains inclusive design in such an easy way. So she says that inclusive design doesn't mean you're designing one thing for all people, but you're designing a diversity of ways to participants. So to participate so that everyone has a sense of belonging. So it's basically okay. So to drill down further, I'll go through the three major principles of inclusive design. So the first one is recognize exclusion. So why is there exclusion in the first place? Because in design, exclusion happens because, to put it simply, we all have our own biases, right? Like, why would I design things a certain way? Because in my head, I'm the end user. But in reality, what about everyone else, right? So it's really more of a shift in the mindset and being more aware, because as innovators or designers or even business owners, it's like you're choosing who will be included or excluded from your product. So that is for recognize exclusion. So for the next one, it's learning from diversity. So learning from diversity. When you're trying to discover how people adapt or even what their motivations are behind certain things, you can only get so much data from simulating it. So I put there in the slides, like you can use your eye masks or you can use your earplugs, but it's still different when you're actually able to interact and spend time with these people and seeing how they really do things in their own different ways. And then the last principle of inclusive design is solve for one, extend to many. So as I said earlier, inclusive design is one size fits one. But the reality is, like learning from the extremes, the solution for the extreme users may also be end up being the benefit of the mainstream users. So an example here is for captioning. So it was initially created for people hard of hearing, right? But eventually, they were used for many things. For example, maybe announcements in loud places, for example, an airport. Another thing would be subtitles, maybe for your K dramas and other foreign films that you like watching. So there are many design innovations that at first has a certain user in mind, but eventually benefits majority. So now we'll go through some of actual use cases. Oh, but before that, there's a lot of confusion between these three terms actually, which are accessibility, universal design, and inclusive design. So I want to go through each one so that you guys can know the difference between each of this. So I'll start first with accessibility. So accessibility is more of an attribute or a characteristic of something as compared to inclusive design, which focuses more on the method of designing itself. But what's interesting here is that accessibility actually stemmed from policies or laws. For example, there was the Disabilities Act that was passed in the 90s, which is what started making wheelchair access more of a standard when it comes to architecture. So that's really where accessibility started. And then for universal design, this is the one that people interchange a lot with inclusive design. The more important point here is that it's a one size fits all type of thing. So it's a design that has the widest range of situations that everyone can use. So the example that I chose here is an automatic door because it uses sensors to detect if someone is there, and it's universal. Excuse me. It's universal in a way that somehow if someone in a wheelchair is passing by, they don't have to think, oh, how am I going to push this heavy door? But at the same time, it can also be used for someone who's just carrying loads of supermarket bags. It also caters to small children, and maybe they don't have to think, oh, how will I reach the door? So that's what I'm saying about universal design. It's a one size fits all. And then finally, we move on to inclusive design. So if if universal design is a one size fits all thing, inclusive design here is a one size fits one. So it focuses more on the process of designing and innovating, and usually it's also a tech or digital innovation. So an example for this is how they created audiobooks for the visually impaired. So now these people have the option to listen to stories rather than their using their sense of touch, which they usually do through braille. So I wanted to walk you guys through some examples of design innovation so you guys can understand these concepts clearer. An innovation doesn't have to be huge or massive to be life changing. It can also be about building on top of an idea that's already existing, but just modifying or iterating. So, for example, a flexible straw or a bendy straw. Do you guys know how this was invented? So, it's actually a cute story. So, the story is a man entered an ice cream parlor with his daughter, and then they ordered milkshakes. So when it gets to their table, imagine being a little girl. The table is probably already this high, and with the milkshake on top, it would probably this be this high. And then you have a straight straw on top. So imagine trying to reach the tip of the straight straw. Sometimes you can't help but spill over your milkshake. So what the man did is he got the straw, he made some modifications to the straw, and that's how bendy straws were made. But it eventually branched out to more markets like hospitals. So for people who are bedridden and have to drink from a tilted position, but then of course eventually it just blew up and it became something we all now use. So as I said, you can make something as tiny as a straw or something as complex as this. So this is a museum naman in Madrid that decided to create a 3D printed exhibit of famous paintings. So you can see there the Mona Lisa. So that the visually impaired can be able to somehow see through feeling the textures and extrusions. So of course, traditionally, there were always braille descriptions that could help them imagine what the picture looks like. But this just enhances their experience so much more to be able to feel it. And now, of course, it's also a new exhibit to be able to see these paintings in 3D. So moving on, that's not all. We actually wanted to share with you some innovations done by our very own colleagues. Um, they're very much inclusive in nature. So this is something that we're really excited to share with you guys. So we'll start with an innovation called Blockbuster. And at this point, I also want to invite my colleagues, Jay and Neil, to join in and help me sharing the stories of our colleagues because they're really inspiring. Hi, guys. Welcome back.
Thanks, Guy.
Thanks,
It's
Kai.
pretty good.
Yeah.
Double for inclusive design.
No, I remember when we started discussing about the blockbuster, we did ask one of our idea owner what's the inspiration, right? And he
Yeah,
mentioned about this winner from America's Next Top Model. Is that right,
yeah,
Neil?
yeah. Neil DeMarco.
Yeah. So yeah, that's him. One thing that actually inspires them is also related to one of their interns who has the same kind of situation. And I want to share with you a video, and then maybe you can walk them through about the video where our
Right.
team got inspired about.
So when we watched this, or the team watched this video, there is an ongoing and an existing technology for uh, deaf people whenever they go to the cinema. So form factor wise, it's pretty big, and the subtitles are not really in sync with the video. And the common happening is that the deaf people using this device just walks out, even without finishing the movie, because they really cannot understand using this device. So it's a pretty good experience, and also, I mean, a pretty bad experience for the deaf people, and that is the reason why our innovators in Accenture took part in trying to improve this experience.
Yeah, one of the things that they did as part of this journey is that they start searching what are the existing solutions out in the market, and then they started to create a prototype that started with a low fidelity prototype, and eventually they managed to do some comparison that an existing device, which is bulky, costs around $3,000, and with the new solution that they built, it's only $2,200. That's 93% savings for the targeted group of individuals who can actually
Yeah.
use it. And I think Kai would love to share about this.
Yeah, so this is basically what they started off with a prototyping phase. As you can see, it's very low fidelity. They just used cardboard, taped it together, and then eventually they were able to come up with something different. So they iterated from that, improved on that, and then they came up with a 3D model. So it's a more sturdy version. And by doing this, imagine, I really felt kasi with Neil DeMarco's video, he was basically saying like, for deaf people to be able to enjoy movies like regular people. It's really hard because with the existing technology that Jay showed in the video earlier, everything was just going wrong and they got embarrassed that they had to leave the movie theater. And imagine they already put themselves out there to try and watch a movie, but with the existing technology, it just wasn't working. So I love how Blockbuster used this kind of technology using augmented reality, ambient noise recognition, and speech recognition. So these are just a few things that they worked on, and they were able to create this prototype. So I think to further show you guys what the prototype looks like, there's a video of them interacting with our deaf interns in Accenture.
Yep,
Jay, maybe
that's
you can
right.
share more about this one.
Yeah, so one thing is in Accenture, our interns are really immersed in a lot of um, innovative work. Like in this case, we get them involved in learning about um, using extended reality, speech recognition, machine learning, and then we get them immersed as well uh, to be the specific persona using the solution. And then after their internship, they managed to appreciate the technology and how technology can actually help for the betterment of the community. And in this case, the Blockbuster was in fact won one of our global innovation contest in Accenture, where our team was selected as Jury's Choice Award, where they disrupt business. And if I'm not mistaken, this specific solution is on patent right now. So in Accenture, when you do internship, even when you get internship in the Liquid Studio, you'll get exposed with a lot of the new technologies and also new methodologies where you yourself as an intern will be involved with a lot of work for our customer and with our customer. Another one is Tessa. This is one of the solutions that we actually created in the studio at the very beginning of our operation. Our intent is to help the marginalized youth in the Philippines, and we use a chatbot which helps the youth in, I think it's in Malabon, where they use Tessa. If you actually use your um, Facebook Messenger, search for Tessa. You'll be able to see her there. And Tessa is helping the youth to create their online profile, look for any training in their community, and also look for a job. And it took us 2 weeks to create this prototype, and then it took us 6 months to actually have it live. And because of its success, Tessa is now being used in the Philippines, and it's being replicated in different part of Asia, like in Myanmar, Cambodia, and also in Thailand. And in fact, Plan International, which is our partner for this specific innovation, have announced in their YouTube channel about using this innovation as a global instance, so that they can help more people in who's in need, that can leverage with technology.
Right, Jay. Also, another point that is good observing on these two different samples that we have. So imagine there are different interactions that you can design products with whoever is the one using it. So the one earlier is our brothers that has the challenge being deaf. And that's a different interaction. This one, we're talking about the marginalized youth here in the Philippines who don't have money to use Facebook Messenger in the first place. So we also leverage on Facebook Messenger Zero, so that the only thing that they need to do is install FB Messenger, and they can readily access Tessa in their FB Messenger without even having data plans. So if you want to key in or search more about it, just go to your FB Messenger and search for Tessa Plan PH.
Yep. So that's actually it, and we're open for any question.
I think we can ask Polly to go
Yeah.
back.
I am back. Okay, I super enjoyed all of your talks, honestly. From like start to finish, I felt like I was learning something new, especially with the parts that, for me, the funnest parts to hear about was the part with Kay when she was talking about how you can actually act it out with your team and everything. And I feel like that's something I really would have wanted to do if we weren't in our current circumstances. Because I can just imagine how cool that would be. I just imagine being a bus together and everything. So it's like a bonding experience. Like you make design thinking a bonding thing with your entire team. So I find that really cool,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so I'll just drop. So if you're viewing from either Facebook or YouTube, you can drop your questions down below. So I'll just be reading them out and everything for you. I'll actually show it in the stream so that no one streaming from either platform will feel lost about who's asking it. Okay? But let
Okay.
me ask the first question first. So for me, what were your best practices in applying means to empathize better with your team to approach the problem? So as I mentioned, the one that Case talked about how you can all interact and act together. What's the user journey? How it makes it like it's like a full body interaction, everything. So I found it really cool. So for you, what are other kinds of best practices that you had in terms of making sure your entire team is empathizing better to approach the problem? So anyone can answer.
Okay. I'll take a stab into it first. One of the things that I find very, very useful, and one of the best practice that you should also do, no, is observe, and listen with your eyes. Be in the ecosystem. It's also something that I've learned from um, Jeff Sutherland, the author of Scrum, where he mentioned about um, you have to observe and then orient. Once you know your ecosystem, you can decide what to do and then act on what you need to do. It's just like in design thinking. Once you have that kind of mindset, it's easier for you to really know who are you trying to help, what do you need to do, who do you need to get involved, and then decide. Don't procrastinate. And then once you decide, it's okay to fail. It's normal to fail. But what's important is that as you do design thinking, like Kai mentioned earlier, you fail mindfully and then capture all of your learnings. In the agile way, we call it retrospective, where you apply all of those learnings to improve the next time that you will adapt or do the solution itself. So they call it OODA, which is or observe, orient, decide, and act. Something that you can that will be very very useful for you to have that kind of mindset as a best practice for design thinking.
It's really cool.
Yeah. For me, Polly, and everyone, maybe best practices is more of like principles also for me. So
Mhm.
whenever we're doing design thinking, we are following design thinking principles like deferring judgment. So for you to really be an effective person to gather data, you should forget about your unconscious biases also. Because at the end of the day, we have our own preferences and also our understanding in certain and acceptance of certain situations, right? But for you to be more open on the different perspectives and also the different experiences of people, you have to be deferring your judgment. And also, one of the good principles that I always follow is building on top of the idea of others. So on top of it, I know sometimes we are champions of our own ideas. We fall in love with our ideas when we share them at the first hand. But at the end of the day, it's also healthy and organic if we merge our ideas with the other person's ideas, because at the end of the day, it's a collaborative work. And if we combine our minds together, eventually it's going to be a better and a more refined version of those ideas.
Just to add on to that, I think they pretty much said everything, but I guess it's just being more considerate. It's funny because while they were talking, it sounds like life advice also, not only business advice with
Yes.
design thinking, but it's also life advice, being more considerate of everyone around you, making it seem like you're not the only one present, like not everything is about you,
Yeah.
basically, to put it harshly. But it's true, as long as you're observant and see everything around you and really take that into consideration when you act, then that's how to empathize with other people.
That's really true. Should it reminded me of the whole dominant worldview part. I'm actually
Did you
curious. Can you
enjoy
have like
it?
a rundown? Yeah, I did. For me, I'm engineer and sage, which I really resonated with
Nice.
when you're talking about what they say. Like, don't they? Oh, we want everyone to feel included. We ask them what they think, and then the whole engineer part where I hear myself saying the same thing, like, oh, we can't do this because this is gonna happen and stuff like that. I was like, oh no, that's really cool. I think this is really important. I'm actually interested to know, like, what are your dominant worldviews?
I'm actually an athlete and an artist, but artist is my main. Yeah.
I am
Oh,
an
it's so cool.
artist and engineer.
Oh
I
my
am
god,
an
that's a
artist and a sage. So
really,
very different mix. So I guess that's where we drive also, super
Yeah.
different mindsets.
yeah. What's so cool? All of you have artists. That's so incredible. That's so cool. Yeah, it actually reminds you about the Adobe creative types, if you know what that was.
I
It's
love
some
that one.
yeah,
Yeah,
it reminds me
I
of
saw that.
visionary stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll pull up the first question from YouTube from
Yeah.
Franz Tabarlupa. Anyone can answer this. How do we
Sure.
filter or decide on the best design thinking method to use? Are there any alternatives to what you've talked about that you did as design thinking practitioners?
Okay, I'll share you something that is also being used in the agile mindset. Um, it's called the Shuhari ways of learning. No, uh, when I started, I actually learned the basics of design thinking, learning the persona, doing the customer journey, understanding the territory map, and then once I get to be an expert of the basics and the rules, I started to experiment. And Neil knows this. When he joined my team at the beginning, I gave him all the basics just so you have a baseline understanding of everything. And then as you become expert of the practice itself, you will tend to see other methods that can complement the basics, and then you start to create a new method. That's why our team in Accenture Philippines, we actually create new methods and we share it to our global practice. So one thing that I want you to I want to stress about is learn the basics first. Once you are good with that, the rest of it, once you're master with that, you will start to create your own method. That's where the re part. You are innovative with the methodology.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jay. So, talking about basics, if you can access the Luma Institute, so I have the book here at home
Ooh.
also. We got this from US when we went there. So, it talks about foundation knowledge from understanding, creating, making, etc. So, topics around, as we mentioned, stakeholder mapping, the territory map, remember, those are some of the basic things that you can explore. But other than the Luma, we're also using some methodologies that are being used like by Google, so
Mm-hmm.
Google Ventures. So if you want to learn more about how can you sprint, design sprint as they term it, it's an agile way of ideating, prototyping, and testing a particular idea. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
5 day event. There are certain activities that you have for Monday, Tuesday, up until Friday, dedicated for a particular theme. Then you can use that also as an alternative. So Luma Institute and Google Design
That's
Sprint
right.
are very mature references for you to explore further.
And then just to add again, that's actually what I love about design thinking. There are so many methods that you, because like let's say for our workshops, they can last for 2 days. But if a client needs just to solve like a certain part, you can really find a different method that would just be for that certain part that they want. So it's really about learning about the different methods and what they're usually used for, so that when a problem comes up, you already know, oh, we should use this method to solve that. So sort of something like that.
Yeah, and also, Kai, if you remember, right? So for ideation, we have this favorite activity for face to face. It's called Crazy Eights. But if
Yes.
we do it on a
Ooh.
virtual, digital way, it's not as effective as a face to face.
Yes.
So you have to really determine where are you going to use it, how you're going to be executing it. So things like that, criteria that you can also include.
That's true. That's true. Honestly, that's like a big question for me. Like, how do we do these kind of design thinking methods? Because a lot of them really rely on being physically there with each other, putting post-its together, and how do we shift this to a more online means of doing so? So yeah, like, do you have any like ideas on that? Like, how do we like? Are there any tools in mind that we can actually do these kinds of design thinking practices with?
So Kai,
Actually,
maybe your turn.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go first this time. So actually, it's good that you brought that up, because imagine we used to do this on a weekly basis with different clients, and when this quarantine thing happened, it's like we were like, okay, what's our next step? So being agile again, how do we transition from doing face to face to online? Of course it would be a different interaction, it would be a different vibe, but we made it work. So what we did is we transitioned everything, and then there's so many online tools pala. Like for example, our video tools, you can use Teams, or you can use Zoom, whatever you're comfortable with. And then for the actual post-its, there are a lot of tools that you can use. For example, what we use is Mural, where we just created the templates ourselves of the different activities, and then the participants just get the link to that mural. And while talking like this via video call, they're actually talking on their ideas and also posting it with the virtual post-its on their mural boards. So, and all of this is live, and we see that the output is still very much the same, and it's still very creative and an interactive way to do it with clients as well. So maybe that's something you can check out. Anything to add, Neil?
Yeah, on top of Mural, you can also explore in using Miro. So it's a comparison with two different companies, but you have these Miro and Mural as one of the leading online collaboration tool that mimics an actual whiteboard or even post-its that we normally do in a face-to-face basis. So Mural and Miro Plus, again, we recommend turning on the video when you do a workshop because it feels different if you see the other person's reaction and also the other person who is talking when you turn the video on. So it's going to be a better experience also.
I think the only thing that I want to add with that is to make the engagement or the interaction lively, is that introduce some fun ways of truly human activities. Like for example, you do show and tell before you start a activity. Ask them to maybe share about their kids or their pets or something. Maybe a show around their working room. The other one is You can also start doing a yoga session. Actually, one of our facilitators do that, doing breaks like, okay, guys, stretch break and all. Like Kai, she will tell us to do some yoga poses and all. But the other one is there are certain tools online that you can actually use to engage people and make them more collaborative, like Verbal Buzz. That Verbal Buzz is a good one. And then we also have like Kahoot and other online tools that you can actually make the engagement interactive. Because once you start introducing that or inducing those kind of activities in the middle of your session, people get engaged. And one thing also, make sure to introduce logical break in the middle. Like every 45 minutes, make sure ask people go on break because I'm pretty sure you want to go on toilet or something like that. Be mindful also of the participants of your workshop.
Yeah, that's true. The whole shifting it to virtual, a lot of people also forget about the whole make sure you have breaks, make sure you get to stretch every few minutes that they actually do in person. So in a lot of companies, they do that. So the next question is from Cedric Joshua Atienza. Hi, Siege. So his question is, how did you guys get into the whole design thinking as a study and practice in your profession? So was it something you avidly sought, or did it just happen to come to that area of practice?
Maybe I'll start. So my background, I used to work in Singapore for the last 10 years as a global solution architect, and then when I decided to move back in the Philippines, I was asked to join a tech company in Makati, and my role is actually doing digital transformation. So all the while, my background is about Lean Six Sigma, global delivery methodology, and then when I move here, since I'm now selling digital transformation, one of my bosses told me, you know what, there's this new method of helping your customer, which is through design thinking. And I was given a 30 minutes overview. But I fell in love with it that after learning about design thinking, I started to search online about what it is. And then I asked my customer, would you want to experiment with me? Because I have this new method so that I can help you, learn whether is that your main problem, what's causing it. And eventually, 2 years down the road, because I managed to, because at the beginning there's not much of design thinking practitioners in the Philippines. Accenture saw whatever I'm doing outside of their organization. They invited me to do a quick talk about design thinking, and then they had hunted me. Once I moved to Accenture, I actually deepened my skills because I started to reach out to global practitioners, and then I started to explore global conferences, different certification, and then I get Neil and Kai involved. That's why now when Neil joined, he has a different story, so he will share it with you. But for me, it's that because I believe in the methodology, it became my mindset. It helped me in my life, and then I just continue to improve it. So it's more to the latter that it just came to us because it's something that is valuable and we believe in it.
That's true.
Yeah, I agree on that one, Jay. Thank you. Yep, Jay has really made monumental progress in the Philippines and Accenture for really adapting to this wonderful mindset. But I want to tell a story rather on why are we really doing it, no? So number one, if you remember Nokia, it's a big organization back in the 90s. I don't know if our participants know about Nokia, but if you Google it, there are brick-old mga cell phones, and they were the leading Finnish company way back on those years. It's their golden year. But eventually, as the market is getting disrupted, there are a lot of other market owners that expanded their areas of production to mobile phones, smartphones. So we had Google Android OS, we had Apple iOS, etc. But Nokia focused on delivering top-notch hardware and forgot to really invest some of their R&Ds in software development. So the message there really is if you forget about what really is the most desirable or even the customer are seeking for a particular product, you will eventually be dying as an organization if you don't disrupt and continue with the flow of progression. So in our organization also, we are having this shift in the mindset So Jay has mentioned that today, a lot, 80% to a bigger percentage of the companies are still in the tech first mindset, but the mindset of tomorrow is really gearing towards to becoming more human centric, because technology, as we all say, it's continuously changing, but it's there, it's evolving. But the customer needs are also changing. So you have to adapt how you develop the products and services, because at the end of the day, it's going to be all about the people, and we should design for people.
So for me,
I
with the
see.
whole design thinking, I only learned about, well, I heard of the phrase, but I only really learned about it when I entered Accenture under Jay's team. So they're the ones who really introduced it to me. I joined the design thinking workshop, and it was a different mindset. And I love how we teach this practice and these methods to all departments in Accenture. So we hold workshops for different departments so that they too can learn this mindset, because it's actually applicable in solving any problem. So um, there's this idea for people that it's only for creative people, but actually no. It's just a creative way of thinking using these different methods to be able to solve any kind of problem. So it's I think it's a good mindset to teach all kinds of departments so that any particular problem that really comes up, they can solve using design thinking.
True. Thank you. Honestly, that's really cool. So that is what people said. Na design thinking isn't just for design related things like designing products and stuff, but it's more of about how you approach a problem and how do you get to the solution. Yes, and I find it cool because it really finds a way to really make use of all your senses and to interact with each other. So it not just builds on the way to your solution, but also in terms of bonding with the people with you who are your teammates. So thank you so much for that. That's CJ's question. Next, can you bring up next one? Okay. So the next question is from Frances Cerise Ong. Hello, Ses. So her question is, what are the biggest mistakes you can make in making outputs like personas and customer journeys? Like I know we mentioned the way we phrase problem statements. So can we start from there? So from what was mentioned before about how the way that you phrase the problem sentence, the problem statements, like the how might we's, how it might affect the kind of answers that we get from our users and stuff like that. What are the other biggest mistakes you can make in these outputs?
Go, Neil.
Yeah, I'll take a first stab in this one. So based on experience when I was starting also, uh, the mindset is really different if you're coming from a software engineering background. It's too technical, it's too engineering. So it was a little bit new to me in becoming more human centered in how I attack solutions, right? So when I was starting, particularly on the customer journey and the persona, I always start with validating what solutions we can already do, even we're just still in the discover phase. So one of the mistakes that I was able to encounter before is, yes, you may know the viability and the feasibility of the solutions, but in the discover and the describe phase, the importance that you must get out of those phases is really empathizing with the customer. So common mistakes maybe is you're already validating and presenting a solution just in the first few phases. So for you to be more effective and really create a groundbreaking solution, you should not really validate much or even invest on scrutinizing ideas at the very early phases of design thinking, because it has a latter phase where you can definitely do those things. Now, on the second point here about phrasing your problem statements, an emphasis would be whenever you're starting design thinking, it's okay not to know everything. So it's okay also to start with the topic in mind that you're interested, or maybe a point that you were able to observe. So it doesn't need to contain all of the details, all of the things that you need to gather, all of the viability and validations at the start. Because as you progress with the latter phases in the co-creation and even in the implementation and scaling a particular solution, you will be having opportunities for you to be more specific. So don't fret too much about, okay, how can I start? I don't have enough data. You have discover and describe phases to do that. So, as a guiding principle, follow the process. We're not saying that it's always step one to X, but organically you can determine that, and don't limit yourself with you don't have everything and you can continue. Definitely you can continue and you can progress with it step by step.
That's true. That's true.
So just to add, I'll start with the problem statements naman. So in the studio we have this phrase that we always use. You can't boil the ocean. So it's basically just saying you can't solve all the problems at once. So that's one of the mistakes that people do when creating their how might we's. They make it so broad that they think they want to make it so life changing that it's so broad and can solve all the problems. But in reality, the best problem statements are really the ones that have focus. As Neil mentioned earlier in the talk, it also shouldn't be too narrow. But then the common mistake is really making it too broad and thinking like I want to solve all the problems at once. It's better to have a focus so that you know what direction you're supposed to go to. And then secondly, with the personas and customer journeys, I think one common mistake there is pretending you're the persona and customer. I know we all have our own experiences with these certain problems, but it's also nice to look at it from different perspectives. So don't only include your journey or your thoughts in creating your persona and customer journey, because there are many other factors that you can also involve.
Yep. Maybe
That's
just
true.
to add to that, sometimes your problem statement can be an aspirational thing, like you wanted to be a specific organization, and then use that as your design challenge. And then as you start exploring, you will get to know who would be the persona that you will help when you want to aspire on that. So it doesn't always start with a problem. It can also start as an inspiration, because remember, design thinking is building on top. In fact, from the book 4 by Scott Galloway, he was even saying that in this era right now, especially in the technology space, no, or tech company space, it's becoming clone wars, where organizations have been cloning their services. Look at what happened with Uber and Grab. They just clone each other and then build on top of it, and it's okay. You cannot penalize others, because you actually improve the services of the existing. And it's okay if, for example, you had mistake with a persona. The beauty of design thinking, you didn't spend too much time putting a lot of plans for that specific demographic. You can always go back. That's why it's iterative until you hit the right demographic. And what's important is, if you feel that's the wrong one, test first. If you test it and they liked it, then that means it removed that assumption that it's wrong. So it's always remember to put the feedback loop in your process, so that easily you can validate whether that solution that you came up with is viable or not.
Honestly, that's true. A lot of people, when I ask them about delving into like design thinking or even into like things like user experience design, like usually get scared now. They feel like in one go it has to be correct, or they're
Mm.
kind of scared of, yeah, they're kind of scared of making mistakes. But then, as you said, the design thinking process really is about not just creating things, but also iterating and just improving from there. So I think it's important for everyone who has in mind that they want to get into these kinds of things, like not just like design thinking, but also designing in terms of user experience, web design, conversation designing, etc., etc. That truly is not just about giving the right output, but more like how do you evolve the first output. So that's really important. So thank you so much for that. So let's put up the next question. So the next question is by, let's show here. Okay, can you pull up the next question? Okay,
Kay
so
Harvey
it's
daw
by
kasi, that's why it's not showing. Harvey.
makulit eh. Wait, our next question is by Harvey Susan, as we know. And his question is, how do you balance the interests of the business and the interests of your target users? Because from experience, most of the time, the interests of these two sides clash with each other.
Okay, so that goes with the business agility, no? At the end of the day, if you look at it, you have to have synergy with both sides, and you have to find a common ground so that both of them will benefit. And once you start focusing on either side, always focus with where the revenue is coming from. Like for example, in our case, sometimes I think your side should be business and IT because this is the one we clash. But with the business, it's always about their customer. From the C-suite perspective, if you are investing in this kind of activities like design thinking, the very first question that they will ask you, if you spend this amount of time and you are actually only helping internal, which will benefit in whatever you will be innovating, they will ask you, why would I spend that if it will just erode my, my let's say budget. But if they will ask you if you are doing something for your customer that will in turn increase your revenue, definitely the C-suites are into that. And that's the reason why Apple actually became successful because they were thinking of their customer first before their IT. Because Steve Jobs knows that whatever the technology can do, it's actually malleable. It can get into a liquid form that it can be customized to what the customers need. So always focus on the customer who will pay for the service because they are the one who will fund for the innovation anyway.
Yes. To add to that, I like how when we do workshops in the studio, we actually have people from each sort of circle present. Like we have people who are key stakeholders, we have users, we have the IT people, at least representatives from these different groups. We have them present in the room, co-creating together, so that once the solution comes up, it's actually a solution that they all work towards. So there's no clash when you do a group work like that. And usually, also with the dominant worldviews, they're able to really jive together. So groups from key stakeholders, IT, design people are grouped together, and then by doing that, the output that they really come up with are really good output, and they did it together as a group. So that's what I really appreciate about doing it together as a team.
Yeah, sorry, I was doing an illustration here on my part, on my side, but I want to show the representation here. So if you can see here, a good augmentation with what Jay has also mentioned about aligning the business and the IT side, right? So whenever we're trying to decide or do design thinking, it talks about, again, going back to our nutshell definition, right? The desirability, the feasibility, and also the viability. Desirability talks about the customer. What does the customer want to see, feel, use, etc.? The feasibility is a validation is of even asking the question, is it really possible to be developed with the current technologies that we have right now? Then eventually going back to the business, this is where we you ask the question right now, is it really going to be a product that will eventually be a revenue stream for the organization? So if this three doesn't meet in the middle, definitely maybe that product needs some further refinement. We're not saying that we won't be pushing with this particular idea, but what we're saying is we can improve it and refine it in such a way that we can meet the desirability, the visibility, and the viability of that particular idea. So think about it. Design thinking is not just about butterflies and colors, but there are validations for the business. There are validations also for the possibility of the development.
Well, thank you so much. Honestly, that was super interesting. But then I also understood now what was mentioned a while ago was that in the end, the users are the ones who are using it, and it's them who basically say if it's really desirable, if it's something that they really use. So in the end, it's more really about understanding and just hitting like the balance between the two. So that's very true. So thank you. That was Harvey's question. We'll move on to the next question. Can we pull it up? I'll just see. Okay. So next question is by Jeff Sia. So his question is regarding the whole design journey. What are the greatest roadblocks you've experienced in the design thinking process, especially in terms of empathy-related aspects, and how did you address them?
Go Kai.
That's a tough one. I feel like it's a Miss Universe question or an interview question.
Grandpa.
Hmm. Roadblocks we've experienced. Well, because honestly, in the studio, it's really okay to fail. Um, Roadblocks are very much welcome, and this is something that we always say. We love problems because we love finding solutions for them. So maybe in terms of roadblocks, because the thing is, the design thinking process is the solution. So
Yeah.
when roadblocks come our way, we can always design think it and then reverse engineer and find the solution for it. So that's my answer. What's yours, Neil?
So I'm the second one, no, second runner up now. Uh, for me, siguro, it's all about who who the people you're presenting your idea to. So you have to understand that we have different personalities and there are different formats of or ways you can present a particular idea. For example, if you're going to be profiling a worldview or a mindset, if you're presenting to a particular personality that is more analytical and dominant, definitely they want to get on what are you talking about. They are not up for really a long discussion of what is the history of this idea. We're not saying that remove the empathy on your presentation, but if you can add more quantitative data to support your claims, then it's going to be a better presentation. So my point is, roadblock maybe not everyone will be that accepting to your ideas, but at the end of the day, accept that we have different preferences and perspectives, and also maybe the format that you use may not be as friendly for them because they have a different take of accepting future ideas. So acknowledge that there are different personalities and ways on how you can effectively present or pitch an idea to them.
That's
So for me, it's one thing that we introduced just this year about facilitation technique. Before you even start your design thinking with a group of people, because most of the time it will be your first time meeting them. When you start putting framework in your facilitation, like putting guardrails, like for example, you start with a technique called power. Like there should be a purpose, what's in it for me, and then purpose, outcome, what's in it for me, and then your engagement, roles, and responsibility. Like what Neil says earlier, there's a lot of dominant personalities involved in this kind of sessions. And then when you put those kind of guardrails, the other one is called 3A at the beginning of your workshop. You will get them agree that there should be an attitude, and then your attributes and agreement within that specific session. When you are getting people that are dominating a specific discussion and empathy becoming a bit difficult, you can also use this one, which is Elmo. When this is common, especially I think when you start working, you will see this kind of people that they will derail the entire conversation. But when you introduce this kind of guardrails, and if you're having this kind of difficulty or roadblock in a specific session, you can actually ask people, Elmo stands for everyone, let's move on, if what they're discussing is not related. So, one example that I had in here is that um, there are certain individuals that they have ego. They wouldn't want to follow a lot of all these things, right? But if at the beginning of your facilitation, you already set those guardrails and rules, you can quickly stop them by saying, guys, Elmo, because let's respect everyone's time, and what you're sharing is not helpful, and get the consensus, because it's about empathy to the participants itself. So those are the kind of things that we use, and it's effective, and any level can actually understand, because at the beginning you're setting those rules, and it's important that when you start doing it yourselves as well, learn to put your guardrails at the beginning of your session, so that when roadblock happens in the middle, call those and make sure that those are visible in your session, and tell them, guys, I think we need an Elmo here. Yeah.
Okay. That makes so much sense. Honestly, for me, it's one of the things that I'm worried about. Like, what if we suddenly don't know what to do anymore? What do we do now? And what if there's kinds of things that we can't exactly overcome? So actually, we're nearing 7:30. If it's okay with you, we can still continue the Q&A. We have 4 questions left. Will that be okay with you, or would you prefer that we'd send the questions to you instead?
I think let's just take some, because we have another call after this. I think one of the questions that they have here is,
Yeah.
what great books? And let me get some of the books that I have.
OJ.
So we'll end with this question.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Okay. Okay.
thanks,
Because
Pat.
there's a lot of good questions from
Yeah.
Tanzo, also Miguel here.
But while Jay is getting his book that he recommends, I also want to share mine since my it's just a
Yeah.
short answer. Actually,
Yeah.
Jay's the one who gave it to me, so it's nice because it
Right.
Christmas, Jay actually got us books based on our personalities. So Jay shared with me this book, which is called "The Design of Everyday Things" by Don Norman. So
I
Jay,
love that one.
it's so good. So especially for UX, it makes so much sense, and not only for UX designers, but just everything in general. It's like you realize like every little detail in everything you see around you has a purpose. So that's the book I wanted to share with everyone.
I
Yeah,
have a
it's
Before
such
you
a
couple of
good
books.
one.
Yeah,
Oh
go.
my
I like. So from Ural, very timely. I'm more of a practical guy. My engineer head is really working a lot of the time. But if you want to, explore more about how do you do it remotely, then they have this Bible. It's online. You can have an access to it. So it's Mural facilitating remote workshops.
yeah.
Yeah, for me, I have four, but I recommend you start with this 10 Phases of Innovation by Tom Kelly. He's from IDEO. And then you learn about Change by Design by Tim Brown. And then the other two, which I'm still actually reading, is Creative Confidence. And lastly is The Art of Innovation. So all these are amazing book. If you want to be in this kind of work, it's not just about empathy and all that. It's also about thinking beyond your mind can actually perceive, because it's innovation. You have to be creative. You have to be crazy sometimes. But these are the books that I recommend to you guys. Unfortunately, we have to
Yeah.
call because we have another session later for another. But we
Okay.
appreciate your
So
time anyway.
For your closing, Polly.
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So thank you very much to all of our speakers today, to Kate, to Jay, and to Neil. So thank you so much, guys, for all of your comments, for all of your questions. Really appreciate every single one of them. Shout out to Accenture, of course, to RCBC, and most importantly, also to DSC Loyola for hosting this event. So as you know, you can always send us any questions. We'll forward the ones that we weren't able to ask them. So for Tanza and for Miguel, we'll just forward their questions to them through email, and then we'll send them back to you since we know the both of you anyhow, the answers to their questions. So again, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Accenture, for telling us more about the design thinking process and taking us through the different knowledge that you have regarding it. So again, thank you everyone for coming to Tech at Home Week 6, Empathy Breeds Innovation, Design Thinking Essentials. And thank you very much to our speakers, Kay, Mia, and Jay. Please give a round of applause and thank you so much for coming. See you next time.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you
Thank you
guys.
for
Thank
having
Stay
us.
you.
safe and healthy.
Stay safe.
Thank
Stay at home.
you.
Bye. See
Bye
you later,
bye.
Ming.